I'm pulling this up, would you like to introduce yourself and talk about like your history as a historian?
Okay. My name is Carlin Lauer. I'm a retired pharmacist. Actually, got my education from Ohio Northern. Worked all of my life here in the Cridersville and Lima area. And when I retired, I was looking for something to do to give back to the community, and I always enjoyed history. And so I started volunteering at the Allen County Museum. I went through the whole docent classes that they give. I am a docent there, which means I do floor duty, but I also lead tours, and I also do presentations for them. So I'm not an, shall we call it an official historian, but I love history. I love to study history. That's what I read all the time. So that's, I guess in that sense, you could call it, I'm an amateur historian.
Oh. And that we relate, I guess. All right, so the first question I have is, how did Lima evolve from its early days as a settlement into the city it is today? And what were some of the major industries?
Okay. Early on, in the 1830s is when it actually developed. Pioneers were just looking for, it just seemed to be human nature. We wanted to move west. And the area was just opening up in the 1830s because the Native Americans had been cleared out of the area and moved west. And the swamp, which we're right on the edge of the Great Black Swamp, was just kind of starting to open up, so with drainage laws and so forth, to drain out the swampy areas. So that's how things got started. It was slow. It was just a few cabins here and there. Christopher Wood was one of the first people to come to the area in the Sugar Creek area, which is kind of northeast of Lima. And it kind of developed from there. He brought his family. There was another family about 5 miles away from him. There were other families in the Cridersville area. The Fort Amanda had started with when they tried to clear the Native Americans out. So there was a beginnings there, but things just kind of progressed. And if you read history, it just grew kind of gradually in the 1850s, 1860s, and then the big event was in 1885 when they found oil in the area, and that really mushroomed the whole development because we got all this influx of Eastern big business money, and the solar refinery started with Rockefeller's money. And that really brought the development full circle. It grew and it grew and it grew. And, of course, one industry, solar refinery and oil, begets other industry. And so money just was very fluent. And that's where Market Street, all of the fine big houses on Market Street really developed during that time period. And then, of course, trains. Trains were a big event starting in the 1850s or so, but they really got started in the late 1890. During the whole world was going through that. So trains and oil were the big things in Lima. With that being said, it continued to develop, and in 1950, Ford Motor Plant came to Lima. About the similar time period, Procter & Gamble came. It's just one industry brings another. And so that helped it to grow.
I remember there's quite a lot of information at the museum about striking oil in Lima, so I just wanted to mention that as a question. And then the next question I have... Oh, sorry, what?
Yes, the oil was a big thing for Lima.
Yep. My next question is what role did Lima play in regional or national events through its history, such as wars or social movements?
Well, that's an interesting thing. Lima was a first in many things. The oil was the first oil found outside of the Pennsylvania area. They thought it was a waste of time, but it was developed. And our refinery in Lima is the longest continually operating refinery in the nation. So it was very important in that respect. The train industry in Lima was well known across the nation. And in fact, Senator Calvin Bryce was a train attorney. And that was in the late 1800s also. And he became a senator and was very well known. And our John Singer Sargent painting that we have at the museum that we own is of Senator Bryce. So he was well known across the world, in fact. Also, we were one of the first cities to have the underground wiring for telephones. We were also one of the first cities of our size to have the interurban or the trolley system. So we were really a very progressive in the early days. And then as things developed, our Ford engine plant is known at least regionally, and I would say nationally. Procter & Gamble, at the time that they first built it, I'm not sure now, but when they first built it, the warehouse was the state-of-the-art and one of the biggest Procter & Gamble warehouses in the world. So all of those things together makes it very important. And there's so many other things. You know, the Liberty truck from World War I was actually built here in Lima. And they took it to Washington, D.C. as a prototype, and they studied it and decided, yes, we can use this. Now, it was made other places, but the prototype was made here. And, of course, the Lima Locomotive Works made trains for the entire world. Fifth largest train engine maker in the world, and the only place the Shay locomotive was built was here in Lima. And at that time, that Shay was used around the world. It was a different type of gearing, and it was much stronger than the other engines, so it could carry heavy loads up inclines. And then, of course, the Joint Systems tank plant. That's known around the world, and those tanks have been used all over. And Ohio Steel Foundry was here. The steel was developed for World War II uses in airplanes. And when Westinghouse was here, they wound engines, motors, for airplanes. So we've been active in almost every war. Socially, you know, we had one of the first black police officers. His name was John Lilly in the late 1800s, 1890s, and early 1900s, was a black police officer. And then we had one of the first black police chiefs, William K. Davenport, in the 60s, and that was during the time of the riots. And he was, in my opinion, a very good police chief. And probably because he was black, it helped us to stay maybe a little bit more stable than other areas were.
Very interesting. All right, next question is, can you discuss any notable landmarks or historic sites in Lima and their significance to the community?
Well, Fort Amanda is always a notable thing in its place that it had with the Greenville Treaty and the Battle of Fallen Timbers when he defeated the Native Americans. It was an early life, and they were a big builder of boats there to go up and down the Auglaize River to fight in those early Native American wars. So that's an interesting place, not necessarily a positive place because their treatment, not necessarily there, but the overall treatment of the government with the Native Americans is not one you really like to think about. But that's an important thing for this area. The edge of the Black Swamp here, where we are, is where a lot of the Shawnee Indian Nation stopped. And then over around Upper Sandusky, the Wyandot stopped there because it was all black swamp, and they thought it was evil spirits. And then the early pioneers called it miasma, but it was just malaria because of the swamp area. So it's important in that our refinery is certainly important. You know, every drop of jet fuel from the Dayton airport and from the Columbus airport comes from our refinery. And every drop of jet fuel that the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base uses, and that's a really special formulated jet fuel, comes from our refinery. If you fill your car up with gas, there's a 25% chance it was made right here. So our refinery is certainly worldwide known. We've contributed many very well-known people, Hugh Downs and Phyllis Diller and Joe Henderson, a famous jazz musician. They all came right here from Lima. So we've had our contributions to government and to Lima and to industry.
And then I have two more questions. So, how has Lima been affected by major historical events such as economic downturns or natural disasters?
Okay. Well, the economic downturns, you know, that's fairly well known, at least to my generation. They made a movie about our area once, and they called it Lost in Middle America, and it was about the rusting of the cities because Lima just kind of disintegrated. You know, everything moved from downtown out into the suburbs and the malls and that sort of thing, and the downtown just really died, and there just wasn't much. The housing moved out, but it's turning around. It's turning around, and that was an event that happened all across the United States, especially the northern cities. People were just leaving, and they're beginning to come back again, and the inner cities are beginning to grow. So that's one thing. Now, I've forgotten the last half of that question.
So such as economic downturns or natural disasters?
Natural disasters, okay. Well, the natural disasters, I can't think of any big natural disasters here that have happened that affected big swaths. You know, we had a tornado go through the area when I was quite a little girl, so it's been 60 or some years ago. And it went through across the northern part. And that was pretty much a devastation to those farms across there. You see the pictures today. That's what happened up there. We had some, I don't know if you call them natural disasters, but we had some industrial accidents at the refinery. In fact, I had an uncle that was killed at an explosion at the refinery back in, that would have been in the 60s. I think there were 4 men killed in that explosion. So things like that have happened. We've had the blizzard that went through here, a couple of blizzards in the January of 77, and there was also one in January of 76. That was a major disaster. This area is always going to be prone to weather-related things with blizzards and tornadoes, but overall we pretty well avoided those things. It hasn't devastated us like it has a lot of cities.
So I remember the exhibit of the flood of 1913, and
that that flood really affected the Dayton area, where there are 5 rivers that come together. That was a major event for them. Now, we experienced flooding here, and there were a lot of low-lying areas that were flooded, but the Dayton area was the one devastated by that.
All right, and the last question is, are there any lesser-known or forgotten aspects of Lima's history that you think are important for people to know about?
Oh, there's so much we don't have enough time to talk about that. There's so many things about Lima that people just take for granted, even people that live here. They don't know it, they don't understand it. The oil industry and the people that drew. I just did a talk for the Historical Society on oil, and it's fascinating, the men involved with it and what all developed because of that. Ford Motor Plant has made some big inroads on automobiles built here in America, total American companies. And of course, you can't talk enough about the tank plant, because they're still affecting wars around the world. We've had really interesting people that came from here and did fantastic things. We've got Nobel Peace Laureates from here. We've got Nobel physicists from here. We've got some pretty famous actors and actresses from the Lima area. And they all relate back. Did you know one of the Beach Boys, El Jardine, was from the Lima area?
Oh, no, I didn't.
But, yeah, a lot of people don't know about this, but they contribute, they attribute their success many times to come back to the Lima area, and they say, well, I went to Horace Mann Elementary School, and that's where I got a love of music or whatever. So there's a wonderful hometown feel about it that nurtures development, I think, for a lot of people.
Fascinating. Yeah, I didn't know that one of the Beach Boys was from Lima. It's really interesting.
Yep. Yep.
All right. That's all the questions I have, but is there anything else that you'd like to mention about the history of Lima?
No, I just encourage everyone to come to the museum. We have a docent on duty all the time, and the docents love to talk about Lima and the history of Lima. So come and we'll tell you all about the canal and the effect that had on Allen County. We'll tell you about the Shea, and we'll tell you about the early pioneers. And John Dillinger, we didn't even start talking about him. He's a fascinating guy to study, and a tight history with Allen County. Come to the museum. We'd love to talk to anybody that's interested.